D.C.
The homicide rate in the district continues to climb.
Drugs have permeated our entire community.
The nation's capital.
It is happening at every school. It is happening everywhere.
You could just be walking and that bullet can just hit you. Bullet don't got no name on it.
Give me your hands, give me your hands.
A city under siege.
Neighbors say they were paralyzed with fear after hearing at least 5 or 6 gunshots.
Another teenager shot, another family suffering.
Go ahead.
You ride up and you see a person in a car with his head literally shot off, blood and guts everywhere.
There has never been more carnage on our streets.
The height of the crime crisis lasting from 1988 through 1992.
Police launched yet another attack on suburban open-air drug markets.
The drug trade was brazen. Open-air markets flourished with hundreds of buyers and sellers.
They didn't seem to be worried about police or neighbors.
And turf wars between gangs and crews unleashed the type of violence on the streets of D.C. that had never been seen before.
I heard 3 shots, about 11.
Murders, robberies, carjackings. The numbers were all sky high.
Narcotics officers recovered more than $14 million worth of drugs and more than 200 weapons, some of which were used in homicides.
It seemed no one was immune from the violence.
For the second time in just 1 week, a student at Dunbar High School has been gunned down on a D.C. street.
Makes me scared to come to school sometimes.
Why?
Because you never know, you could just be walking and that bullet can just hit you.
Residents were fed up.
They're frightened. They don't know what will happen next when we find a body laying in the alley. Maybe wake up one morning, there'd be one on your front porch.
We want our neighborhood back.
Law enforcement overwhelmed by the drug-fueled violence.
Assistant Police Chief Isaac Fullwood says the only real way to make a difference is to mobilize citizens.
In November 1988, Fox 5 launched a series called City Under Siege. A popular nightly report exposing the district's drug problem and the violent fallout.
Police are still looking for suspects and clues. At 10:30 this morning, in an alley near the corner of 13th and Q Streets Northwest, a 16-year-old girl was gunned down.
Reporters put law enforcement and city officials on the hot seat, pressing for answers and solutions. Residents took their questions and concerns right to D.C. drug czar Sterling Tucker.
How is it that the United States can manage to go into Panama and get Noriega, but they can't stop the inflow of drugs into Washington, D.C.?
I think it simply shows that by getting Noriega, it shows that we can do just about what we want to do. And I think we can stop the flow of drugs to some degree.
Everything was happening daily.
Ozzie Corson was a photographer at Fox 5 when the station started the City Under Siege program. He remembers the mayhem in D.C.
Pretty much every day that I'd be winding up going out on a jump out or some beat with the police as far as trying to interdict on a dealer level.
And the crime statistics help paint a clearer picture of how bad it was in D.C. from 1989 to 1992, when the murder rate topped 400 each year. According to the Disaster Center, in 1989, D.C. recorded 462 homicides. In 1990, 498. In 1991, the numbers reached an all-time high of 509 homicides. It dipped in 1992 to 460.
In some neighborhoods, it seemed like almost everybody had a gun.
Ruben Castaneda was a crime beat reporter for the Washington Post in 1989 and the author of the memoir S Street Rising: Crack, Murder, and Redemption in D.C. Castaneda covered the crack cocaine epidemic and the fallout, not just as a reporter, but as a one-time user, secretly buying and using crack himself from the same neighborhoods and people he was reporting on during the day.
It was a really exhausting and
dangerous time in my life. Somehow I survived and was able to quit.
He says the cause of the violent crime back then wasn't only because of the drugs, but the fights over territory and killings over the slightest provocations.
Initially, the violence began with these crews, which were usually teenagers and young men in their 20s, fighting over lucrative turf, corners, housing projects, streets. And then that transformed, evolved, if you will, into a culture of violence where everybody was armed up and the smallest slight could lead to a shooting. Somebody bumps into somebody at a nightclub, somebody talks to somebody's girlfriend, and that in turn evolved into a culture of retaliation. You shot one of mine, I'm going to come back and get one of yours, and so on and so forth. And there were many of these, I call them matrices of violence in different neighborhoods in the city.
It wasn't just homicides. Incidents of carjackings were also through the roof. 8,291 in 1989. The crime reached a peak in 1992 with more than 9,000 carjackings reported. Robberies were in the thousands too, climbing each year with nearly 7,500 reported in 1992. So what was fueling this surge in crime? Drugs, mainly crack cocaine, an epidemic that gripped not just the district but nationwide. But what was unique about the crime crisis then was how targeted the killings seemed to be, as opposed to how random they seem now.
The vast majority of the violence occurred in distressed neighborhoods in the eastern half of the city. To be sure, there were isolated incidents in which individuals who were not living in those neighborhoods, not involved in that lifestyle, were affected, maybe shot by a stray bullet, or just robbed and killed people in nice neighborhoods in Northwest or in the downtown region, but that was the exception.
There are now more homicides in D.C. so far in 2023 than there were all of last year.
2023 is on track to be one of the deadliest D.C. has seen in decades.
We are sick and tired of the gun violence in this city.
I just heard the gun go off. I mean, like a machine gun, brrr, like that. That was it.
The minute you hear gunshots, you immediately think of your loved ones.
Everybody's just wilding.
I just want to feel safe walking around.
If you're driving a scooter, they'll rob you on the scooter. They'll carjack you in the daytime. DC's under siege.
More than 30 years later, many say the district is right back to being a city under siege, on the verge of reclaiming its reputation as the nation's murder capital.
You don't have to be in illegal activity to be a victim. You can be an honest, law-abiding citizen, and you can be a victim.
According to data from DC's Metropolitan Police Department, as of October, there have been 224 homicides. That's a 39% increase over last year, and the first time in a quarter century that DC's homicide count passed 200 before October. In all of 2021, there were 226 homicides and 203 last year. And unlike in the early 90s when the crime was mainly centered in poorer neighborhoods east of the river and the victims were often drug dealers and users, this time the crime wave is happening in every quadrant of the district, and the victims include innocent men, women, and children, like 10-year-old Ariana Davis, killed by a stray bullet to the head on Mother's Day. 17-year-old Antonio Cunningham, shot and killed by 3 masked assailants as he was walking to work at a Northeast sandwich shop.
Dealing with a lot of violence in the city. My son is, I don't even have the words, to be honest.
31-year-old Nasrat Ahmed Yar, a Lyft driver and a father of 4, who served as a translator in Afghanistan and was able to flee the violence there, only to be shot and killed on Capitol Hill.
I can't even go for a walk without looking around, making sure that no one's following me.
Even pets are being targeted. Dog thefts at gunpoint are an almost weekly occurrence.
I've seen the story with people grabbing dogs, and I'm like, I'm not gonna just give him up.
What is going on?
So this is very complex, but I'll make it as short as I can.
Ron Moten is a lifelong DC native and activist. He was arrested in the 1990s for selling crack, but now works with young people to keep them off the streets through a program once called Peaceaholics.
You give somebody something worth having in life, right? They're gonna think twice. They're gonna think before they move.
Moulton has seen the cycle of crime in the district rise and fall. He says there are many reasons for what's happening now, but largely blames outsiders who he says were allowed to come into D.C. with untested theories about how to solve crime. Theories he says city leaders adopted, leading to the dismantling of programs that kept young people off the streets and helped create soft on crime policies.
I've had to sit and talk to you for an hour of all the policies that people not from our city came and forced down our throats. And now we're paying for them. From 2008 to 2012, from a lot of work that I was involved with and in collaboration of people working together, we helped reduce violence, and law enforcement was a part of that, let's be clear. So then they got rid of all the programs that were there, they helped, and the collaborations broke down. But the other thing that happened, we brought people from outside that took over our efforts that came from the community to end mass incarceration. And these people were extremists. What is extremists? Well, they started putting things in place where children who commit crimes, where they carjack somebody, even kill people, are released right back into the community. And we're only talking about a small group of people, but a small group of people can turn the entire city upside down.
Criminal justice experts say what is particularly plaguing D.C. is a rise in juvenile criminals and the lack of strong policies to detain or prosecute them. The Metropolitan Police Department reported that in all of 2022, 376 juveniles were charged with violent crimes. In just the first 6 months of 2023, 363 juveniles were charged with violent crimes, a 47% increase. And many of these crimes are being committed with guns. Police say there are so many guns on D.C. streets that sometimes it feels like a war zone.
I do believe that there's an awful lot of guns out there. And it seems like one thing that hasn't changed is that some people seem willing to use just the slightest provocation to pull out the weapon and start firing.
We had these same type of children with the Peaceaholics, but we call it aggressive mentoring. If the judge thought that that child might could be successful in society and release them, we were set up to check on them to make sure they went to school every day. We went to their house at 8 o'clock to make sure they made their curfew. We did activities with them, and we did things to help them and their families. How many times has that happened with these young violent children that we're talking about today? That's what we're missing. The guns are coming from somewhere, just like the drugs came from somewhere, right? And it seems like we can't control that, but we can control opportunity, accountability, and giving our people love.
The increase in crime was the subject of a hearing on Capitol Hill in mid-October. Soon after, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser unveiled new legislation aimed at giving law enforcement additional tools to help keep the district safe. The Addressing Crime Trends Now Act, or Act Now for short, allows D.C. police to temporarily declare drug-free zones all around the city, create criminal penalties for organized retail theft, and reinstates a law that prohibits wearing a mask to commit a crime or threaten others.
Violence is not acceptable in our city, and this perception that people have that you can commit a brazen crime and get away with it has got to stop. This legislation will help change that.
What we're looking at right now is that we have to do something now, addressing crime trends now. I fully support this legislation. Act Now is going to assist us with giving our officers the tools in order to deal with some of the trending crimes that's happening in the District of Columbia.
Mayor Bowser is also pushing the D.C. Council to move forward with her Safer, Stronger Amendment Act. Included in that act is a proposal to make it easier to detain juveniles before adjudication. Ron Moulton says it's a start, but there's a crucial piece missing.
It's policy, and it's people listening to people like me who have been a part of the solution. I've seen us go from having all these gangs and crews in D.C. and violence to changing it, and it came from a collaborative effort. And politicians listen to people in the community who know what the hell is going on. And we have to get parents and families involved.
Ozzie Corson says community involvement was part of what helped turn the tide against the violence in D.C. during the crack cocaine era.
People were frightened, but the thing about it was people were bold at the same time. They would come out from their houses. They would walk the streets.
There was also, to be sure, more effective policing and development played a role.
Many elements coming together to help solve a crime crisis then, and many elements needed now to turn around the tide of violence and crime, making D.C. feel once again like a city under siege. Maureen Umeh, Fox 5 Local News.